Hi guys, this is Debbie with Debbie J's Crafting Corner. Today we'll be creating another Halloween card. For this one, I'll be ink blending with Distress Oxide inks and coloring with some Spectrum Noir markers. This is going to be the last project for my Halloween series this year. I can't believe that I made 27 videos for this year's series. Do you think that was too little or too much? Maybe I should shoot for 31 next year. But starting before August may be a bit too early. Please let me know what you think down in the comments. If you haven't seen the rest of the video series, just click on the hashtag DJCC Halloween 2020 down in the description title, and it will take you to a list of all of the videos. Like most of the projects I've created this year, I'm using a stamp set and some inks that I've had in my stash for a while. The stamp set I'm using is from the Monster Reunion stamp set from Tim Holtz's Halloween release from last year, 2019. I've already stamped it onto some Recollections cardstock and onto some post-it label paper because I'm going to be creating a mask. One thing that I've noticed every time I use this post-it paper to stamp on, the ink smears. It really doesn't matter all that much, except that I'll get black ink all over my fingers when I cut the mask, and it may transfer to my card. So I'm drying it a bit before I start cutting. While cutting out my mask, I'm trying out something that I saw in a video recently. I think this was from Christina Werner, but I'm not positive. Anyway, the witch in this image has her hand on her hip, so there is some empty space between her waist and her elbow that I would normally have to cut out with a craft knife. This time I'm going to cut through her arm to cut out that empty space. When I lay the mask down, the cut through her arm will line up perfectly so her arm is masked off, but not that empty space. Now that the mask is in place, I'm going to do some ink blending using 3 Distress Oxide inks and some makeup style blending brushes. I'm starting off with the new Crackling Campfire. I love this rich, it's like a red-orange color. It's a little different than some of the other colors. We've got some that are redder and some that are more orange, but I love this one that's right in the middle and it blends beautifully. Then I'm going on to Chipped Sapphire down at the bottom of my panel, which is this really nice dark blue. Until now, I didn't realize that I wanted it to mask off that sentiment. If I were to blend over it with that dark of a color, it would get completely lost. So I'm going back and cutting out the mask that was for just the sentiment that I had left off. And I'm going to go ahead and put that one in place before continuing with this Chipped Sapphire. Next, I'm adding seedless preserves into that center section of the panel. And of course, I'm starting to get some ink on my finger, so I grabbed a piece of that post-it label tape, and I'm using that to protect my fingers from the ink as I'm putting it down. You've probably noticed that the ink blending looks a little splotchy, so I'm going in with a second layer, and here is where the magic happens. The second layer is going to lay on top of that first one that is pretty much soaked into the paper and dried, and it looks just beautiful. Starting off with the Crackling Campfire, then I'm going to go on to the Chipped Sapphire again, and then finish it up with the Seedless Preserves. By the way, it took me quite a while to realize that I really needed that second layer on to get a really nice blend. I just thought, of course, that I was doing something wrong and not putting enough ink down, or my inks were too dry, whatever. And you really just need to layer the inks on, and it just turns out beautiful every single time. Next, I'm going to add a little water splatter to these Distress Oxide inks. I mean, if you're going to use some Distress inks, you might as well use some water on there to give a great texture. So I just used my Distress sprayer and sprayed a little water on there, and then I'm just going to blot off the excess with a paper towel. And since I don't want to rip my paper when I take that mask off, I'm going to use my my Ranger heat tool to try to dry some of that ink and some of that water on that panel, and then I'm going to take that label paper off. Since it is a post-it, it should come off without a problem, but I have to admit, maybe I put so much ink on there, I don't know, I did have a little trouble getting it off. So I'm using my reverse tweezers to pick it off and to get under the edge of that mask, and it does look really good when it finally does come off, though. Take a look at that. And I hope you notice what I noticed. That little space between her elbow and her waist, it was ink blended perfectly. So I am definitely going to use that little trick again on there. I decided that the sentiment needed to have a little bit of blue, not as if we had covered the whole thing, but a little bit, just to give it a little bit of color. So I added a little bit more of that chipped sapphire. And now I'm going in with my Spectrum Noir markers. Now I am trying to make sure that I show you guys every marker that I use, but to be honest, all I did with this is that I just grabbed a marker, picked a color as I was going along, had no plan for this. I decided I wanted her hair to be green because, after all, I'm thinking that this lovely lady is a witch. So I'm using lots of different shades of green and going darker and trying to get some of the detail out, like here where I'm using the AG4, and of course blending them back out as well so they're not so harsh. But basically I just went with different greens. Next, I'm going to work on her dress, and I'm going with purples for this. This is the HB, the hibiscus colors, so HB1 and HB3. These, I actually know what colors I was using on there, so I can share that with you. But I'm not really doing anything complicated. I am trying to put in, I guess I want to make sure that there's contrast between the different colors, so I'm not blending out as well as I would normally do. Also, looking back, I think I may have colored some of her hair purple, not realizing that that was supposed to be hair and thinking it was just part of the dress that she was wearing. Regardless, this is turning out pretty good, and I'm just going over all the different areas of her dress, either the dark colors or that lighter color, and I'm not using a third color to blend them out. Like I said, I'm working on doing some contrast. Then I'm going to go in and do a little bit of coloring for her skin because I don't want it to be white. So I'm going to be using a gray marker. Yes, this is, I believe, IG1, so it's a very, very light gray for some of the shadow and to give it a slightly grayish tint. And then I'm going in with FS1, my lightest flesh tone, to color in the rest of her. And that's going to finish it up for all of the coloring. Now it's time to trim this panel down a bit. I'm going to be cutting off about 1/4 inch off of each of the edges, so the final measurement is going to be 3 3/4 by 5 inches. This will give me space to have a nice matting layer before we put it on to the final card base. I wanted to deepen the color up a bit, so I'm going in with some black soot distress ink just to ink up the edges and bring that color in. Now, I'm not real good with this round blending tool. I haven't used it in quite a while. I kind of got away from doing a lot of ink blending, and then I switched over to the blending brushes. But you'll see that I do have a bit of a heavy hand, which means that there are round curves on a lot of the inking that I'm doing that I'm not really all that happy with, which pretty much just means I need more practice. I'm again having trouble getting ink on my fingers, and I don't want to spread it off to any other part of the card, so I'm using a paper towel to hold my panel while I bring that black ink in. It looks pretty good, but that one area is really bugging me, so I try to blend some of it off using that same paper towel. And because I can't leave well enough alone, I'm going to try adding some of the crackling campfire over that ink blended area. Now it does tone down some of the black, so that's good, but it also tones down a lot of that ink, those little speckles from where I did the distress sprayer. So I'm going back over with some more of the black to try to even that up. It's one of those things, you just keep working at it until it looks good enough. Not necessarily 100% perfect, but where you're pretty much happy with it. Now I am going to go back in with my distress sprayer and add some more water droplets, especially since I've got that black distress ink, because I want some of that distressed speckled look on that textured look on that black as well. And I love the way that this is coming out. It looks so pretty. So for the matting layer, I'm going to use this black and white spider web pattern that is in this paper pack. I think it's from Authentique. I'm not 100% sure or if this pad is available, but if I'm able to find it, I'll make sure to leave a link for you guys. So I'm cutting out a panel for this, basically just smaller than a card base, and then I'm going to go ahead and ink up those edges. Again, using the black soot ink. So let's see how this looks. I decided I'm not seeing enough of that matting layer, so I'm going to go ahead and trim down this main panel down just a little bit more, taking about 1/8 of an inch off of each of the 4 sides, so that'll give an extra 1/4 inch total. So now this panel measures 3.5 by 4 3/4. And let's check it again, and that I think looks a lot better. So now I'm going to go ahead and start adhering everything down. I'm using my dot liner adhesive to put that main panel down onto the matting layer and just center that. And then I'm going to use some of that Arteza foam tape that I've been using so much to adhere the whole thing down. I'm going ahead and putting down pieces on there and cutting with some scissors because, again, this is plastic and not paper. And I'm covering the entire back because I want it to lay flat. And then I'm going to start pulling off some of that tape, plastic, release tape. And when I do that, I'm going to leave some basically little handles to be able to hold on to it to try to get my panel to lay exactly in the center. One of the things that I still struggle with, and I've been making a lot of cards for the last few years, is getting everything to be straight and in the middle. I always wind up being just slightly off, and even with this one, I think I get it on there straight, and then after I'm all done, when I look back at it, I can tell it is just slightly off. No one else is really going to notice, but being the perfectionist and slightly OCD person that I am, I'm I always notice. Next, I'm going to add a little shimmer to this card. Now, normally I take my Spectrum Noir glitter pen and I paint over whatever kind parts that I want to be glittery. This time, I'm going to try to do some splatter with that glittery ink. I think this turned out really, really nice, and this is actually my first experiment with it, so you guys have to tell me, should I have left it as it was, or do you like that little bit of extra glitter all over that panel? So this finishes up this card for today, and it finishes up my Halloween crafting series for 2020. I hope that you've been inspired to do some Halloween crafting of your own, and please check back soon because my Christmas crafting series will be starting in the next few days. By the way, I love seeing what you create, so come join my Facebook group, Crafting with Debbie, and show us your creations. I've left a link down in the description box below. If you use any of the ideas using one of my videos, please be sure to post a picture on social media and tag me at hashtag DebbieJ's Crafting Corner. And if it's Halloween, hashtag DJCC Halloween 2020. You can also see all of the Halloween videos that I've done for 2020 by clicking on the hashtag DJCC Halloween 2020 down in the video title. Here are some other videos that you may be interested in. Thank you so much again for dropping by, and remember, if I can make it, you can too.